All right. So now let's talk about beliefs of this group of people that we've been calling the Puritans. Now, important thing is that Puritans saw being moral and religious a part of everyday life. And a good way to think about this is that many people today are just moral and religious on Sunday. Yeah, I know, you get mad, I didn't, if I made you mad, I made you mad. But it's true. A lot of people today in the 21st century, only moral and religious on Sunday. But not so with the Puritans. It was supposed to be, intertwined. Every day is Sunday. Now, here's some concepts that are important to think about as background as we move into the course readings. The idea of total depravity, original sin. Now, because of the fact that we're all children of Adam and Eve were disobedient to God and were cast out of the garden, we're all born with that sin of Adam and Eve. So we're born into sin, and we have the need for salvation through Christ. And without the salvation through Christ, we're damned. And this is important to remember, right? So in other words, when a friend or a family member has a baby, and after, a few days or a week, you go visit and you look at the baby, and the mom's holding the baby, and you go, oh, that baby's so precious. It's too bad it's damned and going to hell. Well, that's what the concept of total depravity, original sin is that we're all born sinful and we're all in need of salvation. And salvation is granted through Christ, right? Now, another idea, basic Puritan belief, is that of saints and strangers. Now, the emphasis with dealing with saints and strangers is upon God. God only saves those he wishes to save. You cannot do anything to save yourself. God will only select a few. Those are the saints, right? Those are those who are predestined for salvation. The rest are the strangers are damned. They're doomed. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I know what you're thinking. Doesn't matter. And of course, the Puritans regarded themselves as among the saints. That's right. The Puritans looked upon themselves as being the elect, the chosen, those who are predestined for salvation. Everybody else, you're going to the bad place. Also, with American Puritanism, they were really, really big. They really emphasized education. Reason being is that they wanted well-educated ministry. They wanted really knowledgeable clergy because the clergy were coming from within the congregation, right? This is an idea we get from John Calvin, right? It was just a layperson would be called upon by God to become a clergyman, right? So the Puritans founded many of the first colleges in America, up there in New England, which is really, really cool. So the study of literature, especially to read the Bible, becomes really, really common. Now, what the Puritan writers are seeking to do is to make God less hidden. And what do we mean by this? Well, I have to remember that God is an ultimate, absolute, holy being, which is really hard to understand and, grasp that idea when we're just ordinary human beings. So they have to try to explain this idea the best way they can to make God accessible and more pertinent to the world. And, of course, ultimately, all writing is to glorify God. Their lives are to glorify God. Everything they do is to glorify and magnify God. So the writings will show reverence for the Bible, very idealistic, how things should be, and pragmatism. This is adapting things for a practical purpose. Then our closing slide. All right, we're in the Renaissance, right? So in Europe, the Renaissance is very different than as it's going on over in Europe. In Europe, there's great interest in the world, right? But in America, unlike Europe, there was a great interest in the world, and the idea in Europe that you could, aspire towards perfection rather than just being fixed in God's plan, which leads us to humanism, which is really big in Europe. Well, this was an intellectual movement that was concerned with human values rather than religious values. So the Puritans reject a lot of those beliefs with the interest in the world and perfectibility as well as humanism. The Puritans, again, this sounds like an echo, but believe that man's purpose is to glorify God and work within God's plan. But the Puritans do embrace some aspects of European Renaissance, especially dealing with Reformation as well as nationalism. The Puritans were really, really big on reforming and educating the populace. As well, if you think about what the Puritans were doing, this is an incredible experiment, right? Lots of people, in these colonies in the winter died, they starved. I mean, this very movement that the Pilgrims and the Puritans were undertaking is expressed in incredible faith and incredible confidence as they were leaving, in one of the most advanced civilizations on Earth at the time, to come over into, the coastline of North America this time. It was a wildland. There was no settlements. Indians, they're regarded as savages. It was a really scary place. So as we move into American Puritanism, we'll take some of the ideas that were common during the European Renaissance, but not all of them. So now, I always tell people that with the overview, the period overview, these are the puzzle pieces. Now, as we go through the different selections with reading, and by the way, go ahead and read early and often. Then we'll start to put the puzzle pieces together, and things will start to make sense. So, always read early and read often. And don't forget, be well, do good work, and keep in touch.